And welcome to Connecticut's statewide Resilience Improvement Plan presentation. During these slides, we will go over what a Resilience Improvement Plan is, what the components of that plan are, and what goes into the vulnerability assessment portion of that effort. Started on today's topic, we just want to touch on Title VI, your civil rights. No person shall, on the basis of race, color, or national origin, be excluded from participation or subject to discrimination in the development of this project. For more information, you can use the link below. A recording of this presentation will be posted to Connecticut DOT's YouTube channel after the event, and closed captioning, including non-English translation options, are available on Zoom and YouTube. The Connecticut Department of Transportation operates its programs and services without regard to race, color, and national origin in accordance with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. Any person who believes she or he has been aggrieved by any unlawful discriminatory practice under Title VI may file a complaint with the DOT. Contact information is below on this slide. Our Resilience Improvement Plan is being funded under the PROTECT program, which stands for Promoting Resilient Operations for Transformative, Efficient, and Cost-Saving Transportation. This program was established under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law in 2021. The purpose of the program is to plan for and strengthen surface transportation infrastructure to be more resilient to climate change and natural hazards, including sea level rise, flooding, extreme weather-related events, and other natural disasters. The PROTECT program nationwide is a $7.3 billion program for fiscal years 2022 to 2026. During that same time period, Connecticut will receive an estimated $90 million of formula funding. On top of this formula funding, there will also be a competitive grant program available for any of those who qualify. Some of these grants are competitive planning grants, resilient improvement grants, community resilience and evacuation route grants, and at-risk coastal infrastructure grants. Now let's take a look at the funding breakdown of the PROTECT program. Of the formula funding received by the Connecticut DOT, a minimum of 2% must be used for resilience planning activities. Such activities can be a resilience improvement plan, pre-design, technical capacity building, evacuation planning and preparation. Up to 10% of the funds can go to planning, feasibility analysis, revenue forecasting, environmental review, preliminary engineering and design, which is falling under the developmental phase. And lastly, up to 40% can go up to new capacity, which is resilience portion of new roads, buildings, extensions, and expanding current transportation services. The remaining funds can go towards resilience improvement projects. It should be noted that funding is provided incrementally and can only be used to fund the resilience portion of a project or improvement. If the entire project is deemed resilient, then the entire project would be eligible under PROTECT. Now we can move on to what is a resilience improvement plan. A resilience improvement plan is a voluntary, risk-based assessment of vulnerable transportation assets that demonstrates a systematic approach to surface transportation system resilience. A resilience improvement plan can reduce the non-federal match by up to 10% for both PROTECT formula and discretionary grant projects. Completing a resilience improvement plan helps align available federal funding with PROTECT eligible projects. And a resilience improvement plan contains a vulnerability assessment which estimates how vulnerable each CTDOT asset is to 4 climate hazards. There are 4 main components to a resilience improvement plan. The first presents prioritization criteria for adaptation strategies. Then we identify exposure, sensitivity, and adaptive capacities for CTDOT-owned assets. We then include a high-level plan with cost estimates for the resilience improvement and the projects. And lastly, we specify implementation timeframes, potential funding sources, and responsible parties. Our resilience improvement plan will be informed by a vulnerability assessment, which uses Federal Highway's own VAST tool, which stands for Vulnerability Assessment Scoring Tool. It is an Excel-based tool which converts raw data into scores. We will then input our existing vulnerability, which comes from existing exposure, sensitivity, and adaptive capacity. Existing exposure refers to whether an asset has the potential to experience a given hazard given its location. Sensitivity is how an asset or system fares when it is exposed to a hazard. This can be based on the asset characteristics, design features, or overall condition. And lastly, the adaptive capacity, which is defined as the asset or system's ability to adjust, repair, or respond to damage. Once existing vulnerability is determined, you can then use that to determine future exposure using climate projections. These future exposures will estimate what mid-century sea level, floodplains, and temperature extremes will look like. In other words, a vulnerability assessment assesses the likelihood that an asset will encounter a hazard and how will it fare if it does encounter that hazard. To complete our vulnerability assessment, we must first identify our assets. I would like to note that we are only using CTDOT owned and managed assets. These include roads, bridges, culverts, transit shelters, multi-use trails, tunnels, rail infrastructure, buildings and facilities, and bus shelters. We then identified hazards. The hazards chosen were sea level rise, storm surge, flood, extreme precipitation, dam failure, extreme heat, and extreme cold. We can then use our assets and hazards to assess our asset vulnerability using the sensitivity, exposure, and adaptive capacity formula. I would like to note that our adaptive capacity used federally sourced data from our Equitable Transportation Community Explorer. Overall, the vulnerability assessment will help us look at individual assets and see the likelihood of it encountering a climate-related event that causes damage. Completing our resilience improvement plan and vulnerability assessment will help inform what projects we should undertake going forward. Some ideas of this are improving resilience of truck parking facilities, improving flood storage along highways, developing evacuation route capacities, improving scour protection at bridges, relocating or elevating roadways or bridges, preparing for flash floods, and adding bioswales and retention ponds to our designs. Please remember that Protect will only fund the resilience portion of a project. However, in some cases that might be the entire project. So what are the next steps of this process? We're hoping to have a draft plan available for public comment in the fall of 2024. Our final plan and vulnerability assessment should be done by early 2025 at the latest. Right now, we have opened a public survey and we encourage your feedback. Please use the link provided here or the QR code to access the survey. Updates will be posted on our webpage at the CTDOT website, specifically under the Sustainability and Resilience webpage. If you have any questions, feel free to email us at dotresilience@ct.gov. Thank you so much for listening.